to know and not to do is really not to know. And I think that really sums it up very nicely, because you really do need to use the theories, otherwise you have not really understood them. Because as Murray Rothbard always says, you have to demonstrate a preference. You can claim A, but if you do B, then B is really what you want to do, even though you claim you want to do A. But demonstrate a preference shows that you were choosing B. So I think it's very important to use the theories that you learn and actually apply them to your life. Otherwise, they're just useless.
Before we dive in, a quick whisper about today's sponsor, Ghost Founder. You know that moment when an idea jumps from someday to why not today? Ghost Founder lives in that moment. Ghost Founder takes the sketch from your napkin, gives it a heartbeat, and walks it out into the world. Fast. While everyone else is still writing pitch decks, the ghosts are wiring prototypes, lining up seed investors, and tuning your ops. Product market fit isn't just a hope, it's an outcome. If you're the kind of renegade who refuses to wait for permission, visit ghostfounder.com. Because around here, we scope things, build things, and fund things, in that order. Ghost Founder, the quiet engine behind loud breakthroughs.
All right, everybody, welcome to episode 16. I've got with me my trusted co-host, Lovis, and a new guest, Mr. Alex Ostergaard. So I think he's definitely going to be our first and maybe only Swiss Viking to ever be on the show. I met Alex last year in Turkey. We were hanging out at the Property and Freedom Society annual meetup. And I think we were floating somewhere on the Eastern Mediterranean when we finally got a chance to actually really chat, right? Because the first few days were just filled with lectures. And I was like, this guy, he's this young guy that's looking out into the world with like tons of excitement. He's already got a wealth of experience. And I thought, so cool to meet somebody that is authentic, brave, just really looking out into the world, wanting to do what he wants to do and trying to figure out the way along the way. So since then, we've become friends. And after Lovis and I started this podcast, I thought, I have to get Alex on here. So thank you, Alex, for taking the time today. Really excited to dive deeper into some of the topics that me, you, and Lovis have been already talking about offline.
Well, thank you very much for having me, and thank you very much for this nice introduction. I will definitely clip this as soon as it is online, and I use that for my wake up, for my alarm clock in the morning, because how can you not start with a great day after hearing such a nice introduction of yourself? So thank you very much, Jason.
No, hey, I meant every single word. And don't let the beautiful lady sleeping next to you hear that, because she might get a bit offended. Yeah. So, Lovis, you want to kick us off with the first question? I've got a few, but you go.
Yeah, so Alex, I'd like to start just kind of going into your background a little bit, trying to figure out who is Alex. And then when we talk a little bit more, I'd like to understand what you stand for, and then how this leads us in broad strokes leads us to a interesting business venture, investment venture that you're involved in. But so just to kind of outline the broad strokes. So Alex, when you think back to your upbringing, your childhood, and maybe early influences, can you identify or can you point at some moments or conversations that helped shape how you see the world?
Yes, for sure. Well, my father is a very disciplined and very intelligent young man. I would still consider him being a young man. He's 60, but he's biologically very young. He and one of my friends, Gentian, and myself started what we call the Gentleman's Club, where my father decided to give us books that we had to read during the week, and then we would meet up every Sunday and discuss the topics of the books that we read. And we started with psychology and self-improvement and the self-image. So we went through Jim Rohn, Anthony Robbins, Dr. Maxwell Maltz, so Stephen Covey. So all these very popular and well-known self-improvement books. And then we went on to Austrian economics, where we read, started with Henry Hazlitt, went into Murray Rothbard, Ludwig von Mises, and then of course also Hans Hermann Hoppe. And then also, of course, some business books like the Rich Dad, Poor Dad of Robert Kiyosaki, read some of the Rich Dad educational books, and then also classics like J. Abraham and a lot of sales books as well. So my father has definitely influenced me quite a bit. And during our talks, I grasped a lot of, or added a lot of new theories to my repertoire, which has been very nice and useful.
So you definitely try to put whatever you've learned into practice?
Yes. The idea being that better theories lead to better choices, and better choices lead to a better life. So the theories really do have to be usable and applicable. So we need to be able to use them in our everyday life.
And just me speaking from personal experience, right? I always feel like if I haven't actually done it myself, or let's say broken it down myself and then explained it to somebody with some actual real anecdotes, I don't really know if I've really understood it, right? Like I think the word understand in English can be a bit shallow, because you can read a theory and understand it, but then you can live it and really understand it, right? Yeah. So have you found that putting some of those theories into action actually made it more colorful, that it added more layers, for example?
Yeah, for sure. To know and not to do is really not to know. And I think that really sums it up very nicely, because you really do need to use the theories, otherwise you have not really understood them. Because as Murray Rothbard always says, you have to demonstrate a preference. You can claim A, but if you do B, then B is really what you want to do. Even though you claim you want to do A, but demonstrated preference shows that you were choosing B. So I think it's very important to use the theories that you learn and actually apply them to your life. Otherwise, they're just useless. And I think you do that when, you always make choices and decisions. That's what makes us human. We act, as Ludwig von Mises said. So acting, of course, implies that you choose, and choosing implies that you have theories. So you really need to, so you're always using your theories. You just need to be aware of what kind of theories you're using. So I think you always, and then just be, newer theories should really, newer and better theories should replace the old ones that you have. And that is the beauty about learning, that you can actually see that your life just gets better. You make better decisions and hence live a better life.
Mm. I've heard, oh, sorry, Lovis, you go.
Could you give a simple example? Like, can you point to one theory that has helped improve your life in some way?
Yeah, well, I'm sure we will get into what we do, or what I do for a living, which is real estate investing in Switzerland, which has been greatly influenced by the economic theories that we have gathered through reading Austrian economics, where we, if you believe in Austrian economics and the theories that you read there, then you know that private property rights is a very important part of your life and your theories. That's why we chose Switzerland, where there is respect for private property rights. So the government and the other parties cannot come and confiscate our property, which is very important when you do in long-term investing. And then, of course, also micro economic theories and also inflation, of course. So we chose to invest in Swiss real estate because we will profit from inflation. And right now we are in an inflationary environment. Hence, we chose an asset that actually increases we chose to do an investment where we actually profit from inflation. So these theories, the Austrian economic theories, really helped us decide where to invest our money. And then we came up with this investment case.
Yeah, it's interesting because when I first got into thinking about investing and studying, macroeconomics, not like you have from the classical books, but actually just listen to all the different pundits out there, right? And And you often hear this term bandied around like, don't fight the trend is your friend, right? And they were always talking about, the Federal Reserve is printing money, so you should just buy the S&P 500, right? Or buy Apple or buy Amazon. But in many ways, what you're saying is the different, let's say, the more classical side of the same coin, right? We are in an inflationary environment. Historically, these environments resolve in a certain way, and
Yeah, I think it's very important. You can do not fight the trend is of course important, but it depends on what is your timeline or what is your investment horizon. Because if you have an investment horizon of a couple of weeks, month, maybe a year, then of course it makes sense to follow the trend. But we have an investment horizon of 10, 20, and most of our investors is just as long as the property lives. So that is 50, 60 years. And then we do not decide and make an investment decision based off a trend, because the trend will change next year. It will change in 2 years, in 5 years. We make the investment based on a sound economic foundation. So it depends, of course, what is your investment horizon. If you have a short term, then of course it can make sense to follow, don't fight the trend. But what's the trend going to be in 3 months, 6 months, in 1 year, 5 years? And that's very difficult to find out. So we just decided to minimize the risk as far as possible with our sound economic theories.
So sound economic theories are not something that's easy to come by, right?
Nope, definitely not.
And I thought it's interesting because you said earlier, if you believe in Austrian economic theory, I'm not sure that belief is necessary, right?
It is not.
It's I think it's so my study is much more superficial than yours. I've really only started diving deeper into it with the beginning of this podcast, because we've had so many people on who uphold these principles a lot, highly, right? They consider themselves libertarian, which often goes hand in hand with sound money economics, maybe something like that. And just from my study, like I read Hoppe, now one of his books, and Hazlitt, right, Economics in One Lesson, I think is and once you get into it, it's one of these things. Once you start seeing the world in that way, you can't really unsee it. So yeah, I'm like actually more astounded that mainstream economics seems to disregard most of it.
Yeah, that is definitely true. And believe is definitely not the right word, but that is, there's not a lot of libertarians. So it is always easier, instead of being like, this is the one truth. If I talk to non-libertarians, it's easier and less of a conflict if I say, well, this is what I believe in, even though it's the same as saying I believe in 2 + 2 equals 4. And that's not really believing. That's just the way it is. And I think that is also true with Austrian economics. There is just it's a sound foundation. And then with the help of the laws of logic, they have deducted a very nice economic framework that you can use.
Yeah. So based on your recommendation, I read a couple of books. One is Psycho-Cybernetics, which I think you mentioned the author. And I think it's quite good. And I think if it was like, it's like the kinds of books that you were referring to earlier, I think are the ones where if you would put into practice 20-30% of what the book says, your life will change for like massively, right? It's not like,
Definitely.
I mean, you were not doing light reading in your gentleman's club. It's pretty heavy hitting, like pretty
Impactful, for sure.
impactful. Yeah, and thank you. That's the right word. Impactful stuff.
And just to be clear, it's very difficult to use all of it. It sounds I try to remember this, use it or lose it, but I lose a lot of stuff, of course, because it's difficult to use everything you learn. But I would also say that Cybernetics is a great book to get your self-image, to improve your self-image.
So just for the audience, what's some very broad strokes for, what are these books about? Just so they know or can get a grasp.
Well, I think cyber-cybernetics is definitely in my opinion, the best self-improvement or self-development book. It's about you having a self-image, an image about how you behave, what kind of person you are, and then Dr. Maxwell Maltz gives you some strategies to improve your own self-image, because you can never be better than your self-image. So if you have a negative self-image, this is the way that you view yourself. You will never be able to be a successful person or a happy person if you think that you are inherently a sad person. So it's about how you can change this self-image of yourself and improve your quality of life doing that.
Yeah,
And then,
go
sorry.
ahead. No, I thought the story of how he came to that knowledge was also so cool. Like, he was a very well known, I guess, prominent plastical surgeon in the U.S. And he realized over time that people would come to him and they would feel terrible, and about something, right? So I have a big nose, and that's the reason why I'm sad and depressed. And then he would fix the nose, right? He can do that with his skills with the scalpel. But then he would discover that I think less than half the patients would actually feel better afterwards. And so he's like, well, how's that possible? And then that led him down to studying psychology in a way, but very empirically, right? So he would really only focus on what he found works and what doesn't. And then he realized over time that he could help more patients with his psychocybernetics theory than with the scalpel. So I think for a surgeon to have that realization, like, I don't know, like, if most people haven't been around many surgeons, but they're pretty intense people usually, and they're
They
very
like
much like,
to cut.
this is they like to cut, right? So for them to admit, it's like, oh, actually there's something better, that's pretty hard to swallow for most of them, I would say.
Yeah, I agree. And it's a really an incredible book with a lot of actionable steps that you can use to improve your own life and your own self-image.
So I would like to talk a little bit about your educational path in general. So we were hanging out in Switzerland, driving around, and I mean, you do a very good job kind of bleeding knowledge that you have into everyday conversation, right? So you try very much to apply what you know to make life better for you and for others. And so I felt really refreshing spending time with you. And so 1 second I was like, wait, did you go to university? And you were like, no.
No, I
And
think that we took that from Doug Casey, because my father, again, has read a lot of books, and he has I think he has the best theories in a lot of aspects of life. And we decided to then do this gentleman's club with my friend and partner, Gentian Percola. And that was, I think it came from Doug Casey, who is just that you should go out and get real experience in life. And my father then just gave us the theories for life that you need. Of course, the self-development and having the confidence and the social skills to actually succeed in life. And then also the sound knowledge, which is the economic theories that we read in the Austrian economics books. And then we got sent to Palawan, the Philippines, to work on a coconut plantation there and help in the beginning. It was a startup at that time, and we helped build some of the procedures at this plantation and the factory that they were building. Because Doug Casey said that you should go somewhere where just because you are white, you will have an advantage, which is, he says, Africa and Asia, because it should be easier for you in a poor country because you are white and you will get a lot of recognition just because you are different. It's easier for you to get in contact with a lot of important people at these places, not because you just are white, but because you are different from the local people there. So he said
you stand
that it
out.
is exactly. You stand out. So that was why we chose to go to work somewhere. And then because we have this investment in Palawan, we were sent down there to work. We had the opportunity. We were not sent down there. We had the privilege to go down there and have the opportunity to work at this plantation.
And takeaways from that, how long were you there for?
We were there for 8 months in total.
Yeah.
And it was really out in nothing. It was out in
Any
nowhere.
Sunscreen? Did you have sunscreen?
Yes, we did. Of
Mosquitoes
course we did.
and sunscreen.
Yeah. But life is hard. That was the conclusion from that trip. Life is hard, but it's really how you frame. Yeah. And how you see the world, because they have nothing down there. They live in really in small, you cannot call them houses. It's really just some, I don't know what the nice word is. Yeah, it's huts. It's really like dirt huts. I don't know if dirt is the right word, but it really is like just the earth and then put it up. So I think it's dirt.
Mud huts.
Mud huts. That's the correct word. And they were just so happy. The Filipinos were just such a happy and pleasant, such pleasant people to be around, and just happy. They didn't have anything, but they were just happy. And that was very impressive to see.
Did that mess with you a little bit?
No, not mess. It was because at that point, we've already been reading some of these self-development books. So I already started to realize that happiness is just a choice, even though it's sometimes difficult if you just have a bad day. That happens. But it's easier if you think about, well, what am I actually angry about or sad about today? And then just say, okay, well, I actually do not have any reason to be sad today. Nobody has died. Nobody is ill. So just be thankful for that. And that makes the choice of being happy a lot easier. So it did not mess with me down there at the Philippines. It was just nice, refreshing to see.
Okay. Yeah, because I asked that question because I think when I was about 27, I can't remember the exact year, but I went to the Solomon Islands as a volunteer to help them build some pit latrine toilets, right? I had the chance to do that. And it was like, I've never been somewhere more remote. We had to fly on a propeller jet somewhere to some island, and then after that, sit on a kayak for like 6 hours with a motor, and sometimes not even seeing land, right? And then finally getting somewhere, and they say, yeah, jump out and climb onto the beach fast because there are crocodiles, right? That kind of a place. And then we get there, and that's the thing, right? They're also happy, and the love that they show for their family members it was crazy, right? Like to see that kind of a commitment to your community, to your family, and to your elders and everything, and always with a smile and always respectful. I was there 2 weeks. They had such a hard life. No medication, no electricity, no nothing, right? But always smiling, always looking forward to the day. And why I would say that messed with me a little was because I just come from Singapore, where everybody has everything, and you need to really squeeze it out of someone sometimes to get them to have a happy, bright thing to say sometimes, right? Like people get pissed off because the bus was late or something like that. And so it's interesting that you say that about, I guess, the parallels, and it sticks with me until today, right? I'm always thinking, hey, if they can be happy, what excuse do I have not to be, right?
Definitely. And I know there will be someday I will receive a phone call that will really mess me up. There will be something that happens that really just all the problems I have today will be immediately really not worth anything. They will be completely irrelevant when I get this phone call. I'm not looking forward to it, but I know at some point something will happen because that's just life. So every day I do not receive this phone call, it's just a good day. Really, it's just, it's easy to say, but it's really something that I am trying to incorporate into my day. Every time I feel down, because of course that happens, but I then try to remind myself immediately, well, why am I actually feeling down today? There is no reason for it. There was I received a stupid email of somebody who has a problem and now they are angry with me. Okay, but who cares? Tomorrow it will not matter. And even if it matters tomorrow, next week, it probably won't matter. And even if it does, in a month, it won't matter. And in 6 months, definitely not. And in 1 year, I will not even think back to it. So it's really, I try to use that perspective as well. How important will this be in 6 months? Not very much.
Yeah. I think I'll borrow that from you. If today I didn't get that call, then who cares, right? Everything else is good.
And it will happen. It eventually you will receive the call that will really mess you up. So every day you do not receive this call is just a good day.
Yeah, 100%.
But I think thinking that way also expands your ability to just deal with stuff, right? And I think it's definitely like something that you can learn is to respond well, when you feel stressed, or, still being able to function, still being able to do what you need to do, even if something happens that's not bad, right? That's not good. And I think if you practice that enough, maybe what the phone call might have been to 20-year-old Alex, when you're 30, you'll be like, oh, this is just another day at the office. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it
will definitely be less impactful, less bad.
So your
you will
ability
not break.
to deal with it. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, there can be situations where life is hard, just even though I do not receive this phone call that really will mess me up. But there are still things just because it's life that just annoys you and are hard. But then again, I always try to put it into perspective. Most things will be annoying now or messing with me right now today. But next week, it will already be a lot less. And in a month, it will be a lot less again. And then 6 months from now, 1 year from now, 5 years from now, there's really not a lot of stuff that really impacts my life 5 years from now. That is only this phone call that I will receive at some point. And it's again, the most thing that I'm annoyed about today, even if there is a big mistake at work somehow, I do not know, there's a big problem at work, I know that most likely next week it will already be okay. It will not be that important to me next week anymore. I will have found a solution, and if not, then it was not that bad at all. So it's also setting it into perspective of how bad is it actually? How important will it be next week and a month from now?
Well, I think that your ability to kind of frame it this way really comes from spending time in the real world, trying to apply the things that you know. I think that's what builds the confidence, because I think that's where a lot of people struggle. They have like all theoretical knowledge, but without having put it to the test, then it's really hard to know if you can trust what you know. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think so as well, especially trusting yourself. If you have overcome a lot of difficult things, then you just trust yourself more. You know you have the ability to overcome hard things.
Yeah. You fixed 1,000 problems before. What is another one, right?
Yeah.
So, Alex, with your kind of non-traditional education path, I guess nowadays non-traditional education path, what would you say these days is a well-educated person?
That's a good question. Well, I think that somebody who knows a lot about the most important parts of life, I would consider well educated, and that would for me would be like having the social aspect, so having friends and family, knowing how to really be a good force in your circle of influence, then knowing something about history, knowing something about economics, knowing something about health, and health is also included with the doing sports and exercises and all that. So I think these four, if you are well read, or if you practice your theories that you have in these 4 aspects of your life, I think then you are a very educated person. That is what I would consider. I don't know if it's educated or successful person. I think it's more of a successful person, actually, not educated. Educated, I do not know what I would consider that. I do not have a definition for that. What would your definition be of an educated person?
Well, I think you have to have a PhD in something. Otherwise, what are you even trying to do? No, I mean, clearly, I don't believe that. I did go to uni, right? Because what I wanted to learn was engineering, and but then the thing is about it, I am actually more interested in entrepreneurship, generally speaking. but then engineering helps me make stuff and I can sell that skill. So that's kind of, that was kind of my pathway getting into entrepreneurship. But then really I'm able to make things because I went to, because I'm a trained mechanic and I put hands-on stuff, right? So I was an apprentice for 3 years, getting my hands dirty, actually making things, repairing things. And that ended up giving me a massive leg up going to university, which the two together is valuable. Having done one or the other by itself is not quite the full picture. So for sure, I think somebody who has, I think, studied, which I mean, getting really deep into a topic, but then definitely spending an equal amount of time or maybe more time actually applying it.
Yeah.
Because so similar to what I said earlier with these books, like if you would manage to apply 20 or 30% of it to your life would change forever. If you, like, I don't know, like a calculus math book is this thick, right? It's like 600 pages. If you could actually confidently do 20 or 30% of that, you would probably be a top 1% mathematician, like in real life, right?
Yeah, and I think for me, it's definitely education is definitely not interlinked with going to university. I don't think that is not a requirement to be an educated person.
No, I don't think so
Um,
either.
I don't know who said it. I never left. No, anyway, that's important. I do not remember the quote, but I think Doug Casey said it very well again. As you can hear, Doug Casey has had a huge influence on my life regarding going to uni, because a lot of the classes and courses you can take, I think, are just a waste of money and time. And Doug Casey said it very nicely. I think he said that if you get a permit to do something, then it makes sense to go to university or actually learning a real science. And that is like engineering, something where you actually learn how the world works, and not like I think if you go study entrepreneurship at uni, then you have already disqualified yourself for becoming an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
That is something you need to learn in the real world by building something.
Yeah, agree. Jason, you have this, what is this, Latin? Per aspera ad astra. What does that mean?
Yeah, so I just had dinner with my ex-boss 3-4 nights ago, and we were having a few beers, and we were just talking about how the world's changing a little bit, right? Like we were talking about education. Funny, we were just speaking about it, but we were more discussing education of the youth, right? People that are around 12 to 16 years old. What is the impression that we as adults, as the prior generation, what are we putting upon them, right? And we were just discussing the state of how kids now get told they are very important, just because of being there means that they have a certain importance. They get told first about their rights rather than their responsibilities. They get told that they have the right to pursue their own path in educating themselves and planning themselves the days out for themselves, right? And that's all well and good, but maybe they might be a bit too young, right, to be having this kind of a free reign, to be so laissez-faire about education, right, without first putting into them some discipline. So it's interesting for me to hear this from this guy because he's German, but he's also lived for a long time in places like Singapore and the States, right? And then he quoted this to me, this line, and I was like, I don't know. I've never learned Latin, and I've never heard of this line, right? And it's per aspera ad astra, and apparently it's through hardship and then towards the stars, right? And that resonated with me because if somebody asks me now, hey, Jason, do you feel you're well educated? Or let's say, put it another way, hey, Jason, where did you get your education from? Right. And I think for me, I got a lot of those educations from my hardships, right? I think about how tough it was in the school system in Singapore, or being in the army, or working for a startup and then getting told, hey, go to China, go to Asia and build this brand up that nobody's ever heard of before, right? All these things were super hard when I was doing it. Now when I think back, I think, whoa, how did I get through that, right? But the cool thing is, whatever you've learned through those hardships, you get to keep forever. And then the next time you meet up with another hardship, like what you said, Alex, right? You've done it before. And then I think that also bleeds into the self-image thing that you were discussing at the top of the conversation, right? In your self-image, you know you've done it before. You know you've faced adversity and come away with something from it. And so therefore your self-image is forever, let's say, strengthened, right?
Well, I think it depends what kind of person you are, because I think you could be you could put somebody exactly through the same experiences that you have had, and they might get the self-image that, wow, somehow I always attract this hardship in life. Life is against me. So I think it is. So you need to have this positive. That's what Maxwell Maltz is so good about work, because then you can suddenly change your self-image from being the victim to actually being, oh, I'm a survivor. I'm not a victim. I'm a fighter. I can actually overcome these obstacles. Because of course I totally agree with everything you just said. But I think there's also people who just think of themselves as victims, and this is the self-image that they have of themselves,
Yeah,
where
yeah,
they just see themselves as victims.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. And you know what? I think it's funny. I think at some point in those hardships, I did take on that victim mentality, right? Like I remember when I was in the army for 2.5 years, I was thinking to myself, wow, it's so unfair. Like I'm 18. What am I doing here? Like I didn't sign up for this. Why must I do this? It's not fair. I know people all around the world that are 18 and having a whale of a time. And here I am, 2 a.m. walking through some jungle, getting killed by mosquitoes. I just want to go home, right?
I
Yeah,
think
and
oh, sorry.
no, I just want to say, and at some point, something has to shift, right? Like you have to think about it in terms of, okay, I surrender to the fact that there's no way around it. You only go through it, right? And I think the moment that happens, then your whole persona changes, right? You, like what you said, the because of that mind shift, the environment actually feeds you differently. You now become stronger rather than weaker, right? Because you decided not to be a victim. True. And then when something gets tough, you go like, hey, that's not going to be enough to stop me, rather than saying, oh my God, so unfair, another bad thing's happening to me, right? So yeah.
But I think that also feeds back to the thing that you started with saying regarding that the youth now feels like they have a right to do something, and I think then you become a victim. That's why my impression, a lot of the young people are now feeling like they have a right to do certain things, and then because life, they do not have any rights to anything. So life just gives them what life is. Like you said with the army, suddenly you have to go to the army, and they're like, well, I have a right to pursue my dream. Well, no, you do not. And then suddenly you become a victim because, well, my parents already always told me that I'm so special and that I have a right to do this and I can do that. But then suddenly life just hits you and it's like, well, life doesn't think you are that special. And then you become a victim. I think that's my opinion. I think there is a correlation between giving people this, they have a right to certain things, and then becoming weak, where they do not have to work for these things. They somehow just think they have a right to it, and therefore it should be immediately given to them.
You're right. I mean, it's this idea of how equity, right? Equality versus equity nowadays is being touted as we can guarantee positive outcomes for everybody. It's like, no, nobody can. It's impossible. And you are free to go and create that life for you, right? That's what I think, that's the best you can ask for.
Yeah.
But nobody can make it for you. And if somebody would hand it to you, you wouldn't be the person to be able to actually take advantage of it, right? So in case of business, right, if you're the person who built a successful business, makes a couple million in revenue per year with nice profit margins, and it, that buys you a great life. If somebody had built that business for you and then just hands it to you and say, here's the keys, have fun, it will be dead within a couple months, because you didn't learn how to actually do it, because you have no experience on what to do with it. And so I'm reading Atlas Shrugged right now. Well, I'm saying reading, I'm listening to it, but for me that's how I find time to do it. And it's like all about that, right? And it blows my mind, because the book was published in the 50s, and so much of what the protagonists in the book say sounds like it was published yesterday, right?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, it's my right, like, oh, my need dictates what I should be able to get. Like the need is all that matters.
Yeah.
And like when I
Alex
listen
is
to it,
raging.
when I listen to it, I get physically ill. I'm like,
Yeah.
wow, it's so on point. And like, I don't understand how somebody was able to write that in the 50s. And then I told my wife, and she's like, well, look, all that means is that this like mind virus has been around. It's nothing new, right?
Yeah.
It's every age, every period had this influence. Yeah. Did you read Atlas Shrugged? by
Yes,
chance?
I read it.
Yeah.
That was one of the first books that I read when I really got into studying. Then I read Atlas Shrugged. A thick book, a very thick book, but a good one.
Massive. Yeah. The audiobook's like 60 hours.
Yeah, I just last time we talked, you told me that you listened to it, so I also downloaded it on Audible. So I'm also listening to it.
Yeah.
Right now.
I mean, we talked a few weeks ago. That's how long it takes to get
Yeah,
through
really.
it. I'm more than halfway through, but the story keeps going, and I don't know. It's really spectacular. But between that, so actually, I've picked up a ton of book recommendations from you, because I also listen to Speculator.
Yeah, and I was just about to say, I think again, I'm really like a fanboy of Doug Casey in this podcast, but I think the Speculator and the other books from him regarding Charles Knight, they are just amazing. I think it's even better than Atlas Shrugged.
It's really fun, right? They're really fun to read. You learn something, and I think the characters are developed really well in it, which is what I think makes it so enticing, and like once it's hard to put it down. And very much like the protagonist is very I understand why this would have inspired you, right? Because it's very much a guy who learns in the real world, and goes and applies it, and doesn't just doesn't take things at face value. He wants to know more. He wants to know the truth, right?
And I just think Doug Casey writes so nicely, and then it's a very good story, and then suddenly just 4 pages, that could be published as an article about something, and then again the story just continues, and it's so nice to have like a good story, and then a lot of valuable insights into an industry. In Speculator, it's into the speculation and making money, trading, the stock market, all that. And then in Drug Lord, it's into the pharmaceutical companies and the FDA. And then in Assassin, which is then suddenly about killing people, taking out bad people. I think very interesting topics, very controversial topics. And Doug Casey and John Hunt just frame it in a way where it actually makes sense, where you get from these bad industries, where you suddenly can say, well, okay, there are actually ethical ways to do it as well. And that sounds crazy when you talk about assassin people, but if you want to know how Doug Casey spins that into something that is ethical, then you can read the books, because they are worth every minute spent on reading them.
Yeah, I would agree. I haven't read the other ones yet.
You are lucky.
No, yeah, I know. I'm looking forward to it. What? So just we've touched on a couple. So we've already said a lot about Doug Casey. But so, for example, Hoppe and Mises, like, what are some things that you would say you've taken away from them that have made a difference in your life?
Well, I think if you read Austrian economics, especially Ludwig von Mises, Murray Rothbard, and Hans Hermann Hoppe, you will start to develop a very specific way of thinking, a tool in your mind that you can use to take better decisions. Because there are arguments that they build in the books and how they describe different problems and how they solve them and how they build an argumentation. It's just incredible. It is, we call it bench pressing for the brain, because that is the heavy lifting. And I actually do believe you will become more intelligent by reading these books. And I can personally feel it. My friends can feel it. When you read Austrian economics in the morning, your brain is just working on a different level. You cannot speed read anything from Ludwig von Mises or Hans Hermann Hoppe. You need to sit down and focus and read every sentence. And I read 4 pages a day. That's all I get in the morning, because everything else would just be a lie to claim that I understand what I read. I need to read it slowly, and it's so heavy. There's so much information and knowledge in there that I think you will gain a certain tool and framework to make better decisions. And that is what we do while working on our business. Then it's always just making better decisions. And I think Austrian economics really helps us do that. Besides of all the theories that you get, of course, but just the framework itself.
I like how you frame that, because when I think for most of the people listening in, when you say, "Oh, it makes you more intelligent," the first reaction would be like, "Ah, but I'm probably born smart or born not so smart, right?" But the way you frame it is, you read these things, you get the framework to make better decisions, right? And what is intelligence if not decision making?
Yeah,
right? You decide what you want to do.
Well, I have Rothbard, and this book is it's a thick book. It's Man, Economy, and State, and this is very just completely different to, for example, like a business book or like a marketing book, which here you get practical knowledge, you get steps, and it feels like, oh well, I learned some facts about something about a business or something. I learned nice facts. But here in this book, it's not facts that you learn, it's theory. You really learn a theory and a different way how to see things and how to process information. Just because you get used to reading and used to the different way of analyzing a problem. And I think it is really bench pressing for the brain, because it takes time to learn. It really does. It's not something that you can quickly consume just with a lot of things in life. You need to practice it. And the same goes for Austrian economics. I think I cannot use this. Everything I read here is not something that I can use in my everyday life. It's very, it's theoretical stuff. Mm-hmm. But because it's so heavy and it takes so much effort to read it, I get better at making decisions that I can use for my everyday life. Mm. So that's why I think I can use everything I read here in my everyday life. Not the information, but the theories and the result I get out of it.
Mm. It's like upgrading your operating system,
yeah,
right?
It is.
Yeah. It's something that runs in the background to some degree. You're not always consciously aware of it, but it helps you.
Perfectly put. Upgrade. Yes. It's your operating system that you can upgrade. Yeah. You're programming a new one. Yeah.
We'll put those books in the show notes. So those people just listening in and couldn't see, I think it was Rothbard for the theory.
That was Man, Economy, and State, and then just the E-Myth revised and 80-20 Sales and Marketing from Perry Marshall.
Those are all. I don't think I've read 80-20, but E-Myth is excellent. It's an excellent.
It is. That is one of these business books that we read as well. Yeah. Just a classic business book. Easy to read, good points, but nothing compared to Austrian economics. Yeah. Different use.
Of course, very different. But the thing is that I would say I don't know. It's probably still true that most business owners have not read E-Myth, and then also the ones that have read it don't apply most of it. And if they did,
It would
their
be
business would
different.
be better.
Yeah.
What's the book about?
It's about creating SOPs, or standard operating procedures, and know what to do and how to do it. So your customers always get the same exact quality and can always expect the same exact quality. So you have a standard in your business, and you are actually trying to build a machine that works.
Right. So
The
how to
framing-
gain leverage without, or how you multiply your leverage without it getting multiplying mistakes in a way, is it?
Well, the framing the author uses is think of the business as the product. So say you're running a bakery, first figure out how to make this bakery successful, then figure out how to create an SOP so that this bakery could exist 100 times in different cities, different countries. So he's very much advocating like the franchise model, right? For small entrepreneurs to get rich, end up, build it as if it's a product and then sell that product to people for a lot of money. And I don't think that everybody needs to franchise their business, but thinking about it in that way definitely helps.
Yeah, it does, because then everything, it's copy paste. If you can copy paste your business, then you have a standard for everything, and the processes are just smoother. The employees, it's easier to get rid or replace people, and everything is just much easier if you know how to do it, if you have a guide on how to do it. The difficult thing that we have found out is then also using these standard operating procedures. So you actually get people to go through them and actually do them, because it's easy to write them once, say, hey, here we have the procedure, that's how we do it, put it in a drawer, and then you forget it. And that has been the challenge that we have had in our business. So now we're doing schoolings and like educational lessons with our SOPs from this year on, because we thought that even though we have standardized everything, we still find that some people do not really use them the way we would like to do it. So we have to repeat them again and again and again.
Yeah, it happens to me all the time, right? We have a service dashboard for field response things, but then we're more interested in actually fixing the problem than documenting it with a service ticket. So it's like, oh yeah, I already went and did that. And it's like, great, where's the ticket? Oh, I forgot. And while I agree with that in principle, it is important to do it. Do it right. Yeah, anyway. So Alex, how does all this wonderful theory, this very practical application of knowledge, how does that lead us to Swiss?
Well, Swiss is a publicly traded company listed on the Nasdaq First North Growth Market in Copenhagen. We have been listed since 2022, July 14th actually. And what we do there is we buy Swiss commercial properties, and then we just take great care of them. And we try to do a wealth accumulation strategy where we do not pay out any dividends, but we reinvest the profits of our properties into the same properties or new properties, so we can get a compounding effect. And what we expect is 100% over the first 100% return of investment over the first 10 years, so 10% on average per year, and 300% over the first 20 years, so 15% per year in return of investment. And we've been doing that for 20 years now in our club deal setup. So not listed, but we have done, we've acquired over 60 Swiss commercial properties. Yeah, we do that for a living down here. And we started with these companies or these real estate investments because my father read a lot of Austrian economics, and then he had previously, before moving to Switzerland, which we did in 2006, that was my parents and my brother, my sister, and myself moved to Switzerland. Prior to moving to Switzerland, my father had worked in the medical field, started a company in Denmark and a clinic. earned some money that he needed to place somewhere safe. And because he had started to read about Austrian economics, he wanted to place it somewhere safe, something that he could understand, and that would actually help him, or that would comply with the theories that he had learned through reading Austrian economics. And then real estate was the choice that he decided to do. And then I have just been very privileged to have a father who had the desire to teach myself and my best friend Gentian about the business and give us the skills required so we are actually useful in the business. And now we are doing the management and the asset management of the companies or the properties.
Yeah, just some full disclosure, right? Like me and Lovis and I actually went to visit with Alex and his dad, and Alex was kind enough to drive us around to, I think, about 6 properties
9.
that day. Oh, did we go 9?
Oh, no, sorry. Yeah, we didn't see 2 of them, so 7.
Yeah,
Saren,
7. Sorry, 7. Yeah, and then also visited his office. And I think, yeah, Lovis and I were impressed, right? Like they were just doing the job well without fanfare, just, putting their head down and keeping the place in good nick. I think anyone who's listened to an earlier episode from Lovis and I, we were actually discussing my trip to Belgrade, I think in September last year. I went to Belgrade thinking about investing in an apartment there, right? And after hanging out with Alex and actually visiting his properties, I on a personal level put all the monies that I was gonna put into an apartment in Belgrade. I thought, why not let these very competent people, whom I trust a lot, manage these properties or manage that money for me in properties, right? In Switzerland rather than in Belgrade. And it looks like it's giving me, pretty comparable rates of return. And I've got so much less of a hassle myself to have to watch over things. So
it should also be said that we only do the property investments because we want to be investors ourselves. So the biggest investors in both the club deals and also our publicly traded company is my partner, Martin Merki, and my father. They are still the biggest investors. And in our publicly traded company, 22% of all the shares are owned by the management. So we always have hand, and of course in the publicly traded company, I'm also an investor, and so is my partner Gentian, who also take care of the business and all of our employees. So the idea being that we really want to have skin in the game and alignment of interest. We are not here to live and take a lot of fees. That is not our primary goal. Our primary goal is to have a great investment and and earn a lot of money through the investments themselves. So that's why we do these investments. It's not about, we are not managing other people's money. That is not what we are interested in. We are managing our own money together with external money as well. But that is a crucial difference between a lot of investment opportunities. So always ask the guy who wants to sell you something or an investment, how much money is he himself putting into the investment? Because you want to be on the same side as the people operating and taking care of your investment.
Yeah, you want to deal with principals, not agents.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So Jason and I have talked about this a lot, and I ended up buying a small flat in Leipzig in 2019 because I also wanted to be invested in real estate, right? And the cool thing about it is it's a rental, right? So really, the cash flow helps pay for it. It helps pay for the property, which is a cool mechanism. But how does that compare? Like going and doing that yourself, how does that compare versus investing in Swiss?
Well, it's just always, you could also fix your car yourself or change the wheels of your car yourself, but why not just give it to the professional who can do that? And especially in Switzerland, it's very difficult to get access to these real estate projects that we take, because most of the good projects, they are not on the market. It's always off-market deals. So the properties that we buy, we get access to because we have a reputation in the market of being good buyers. And we've been doing it for 20 years. So a lot of people know what we're looking for. So we get the projects before they go, before the properties go to market. If a property goes to market, then it's because it's a bad property. It's because all the people in the industry did not want it beforehand. That's mostly the case. So you really need to have a good relationships and good connections to get access to these properties, especially in commercial properties. Rental property or apartments you can buy. They are just super expensive in Switzerland. They are right now. You just buy it at a initial yield of 3 to 3.5%, and initial yield is just the rent that you can get from the apartment divided by the purchasing price of the property. And for us, we are buying properties, commercial properties that yield about 6% currently. And we know if we buy a property where we get 6%, and we do our due diligence, which is, do we have good tenants? Yes. Do we have tenants that are able to pay the rent? We check the financials of the tenants. We do have that. Is the heating system okay? It is okay. Is the roof okay? The roof is okay. Is the earth, the land that we're gonna own, are there any toxic garbage in there or anything? And if there's not, then it's fairly easy for us to say, well, we know, or we are pretty confident that we are going to make money on this. So it's fairly easy for us to select a winning property compared to stock picking. It's very difficult to find out which stock is going to be the next Tesla. And our properties will never become the next Tesla or Nvidia. You will never be able to quadruple your money in 2 years with our investment. That's never going to happen. But it's also very, very unlikely that you're ever going to lose your money in real estate. So we have had over 60 properties, or acquired over 60 properties over the past 20 years, and we have never lost a property. You really need, everything moves in slow motion in real estate. So it's fairly easy to take care of the business. But difficult part is getting access to these good deals, and then just having a good team that takes care of the properties. And we thought that we were going to close the loop with having a team that is also invested in these properties themselves. So I have an interest myself that the properties are being well managed.
Yeah, it's super well aligned, right? You're like a shareholder. And of course, when you think about, hey, should I send that email? Should I make a call? Should I drive down? You're not thinking about that as an employee. You're thinking about that as, hey, everything's on the line. My team is depending on me. My investors are depending on me. And hey, it's
actually the first thing is exactly the first thing is actually, well, it's actually it's nice. Of course, I can pretend to say that. Of course, we do everything we can for all of our investors, and of course we do that. But that everybody does that. But for us, it's I am the investor. So even though I care about your money, Jason, I do care that you're also invested. But I just care more about my own money, and that's why we have decided to put your money next to my money. So I cannot see the difference between your money and my money. The only thing I can see is I know I have my money in here, so I will take care and I will go the extra mile, not for Jason, but for myself. It's just a nice effect that our investors also profit from this enforcement or this alignment of interests.
Yeah, and anyone who's had a few knocks in the real world before would love to know that to say, hey, I'm investing with Alex, and his money's in it with my money, so I can trust that. Yeah, he's a nice guy and everything, and he's promising me a lot. But hey, there's no promise like knowing that we're in the same boat, right?
Yeah, and we are not, of course, again, this is no financial advice. Everything that we are talking about, it's not investment advice. It's just our own, and it's only my own opinions about the project. If you want to read anything about it, then you can go to our website and read our disclaimers and everything, because, of course, it is an investment. So there is always risk associated with it. We just think that we have not seen anything that is that has a better and safer return of investment. And again, it's very important to say that the investment was made because of the Austrian theories. That's also why we chose Switzerland. So for our non-Swiss investors, they get an even greater return of investment because they invest their bad money or the bad currency into a good currency. So if you compare the return that we've had in our club deals that have run an average, they've had a running time of 14 years. The Swiss investors have gotten 25% per year over 14 years, not compounding, just on average, 25% per year, compared to our Danish investors who have received, I think it's 34% return of investment over these 14 years, because the Danish kroner has done like this and the Swiss has done like that. So you have a currency gain. So compared to your flat that you have now bought in Leipzig, what you are doing there, you are speculating on a price increase of the flat, which I think you will receive just because of inflation, but then you're only beating inflation. You do not have, or I assume you do not have a high return of investment through the rents, that if you bought it good, then most likely it will cover all your costs, which is nice. You may even be able to pay back some of the money to the bank, so you're building a little bit of equity, but that is the best case. And in Switzerland, it's not possible. The initial yield that you get, the cash flow is just not big enough to pay back the bank. And you're invested in euros, so you get euros back. And our investors compared that to one of our commercial real estate projects where you buy a property that is already cash flow positive. With the rent that we get from our tenants, we are able to pay back the bank. So we are increasing our equity through decreasing our bank financing. And we have the added effect of inflation, just as you have. It's not as big as in apartments, because you also have an increase in demand. At least it looks like that currently. Increase in demand of apartments, so you have a higher increase in the value, but we still get the inflation benefit. And you have the Swiss francs, which is compared to most other currencies in the world, is very strong and increasing compared to the others. So you have these three effects that are just, in our opinion, better than most other investments that you can do currently.
Yeah, I just jumped onto the Chat GPT just to ask what was the euro and US dollars performance just against the Swiss franc since the year 2000, right? And
yeah,
on average, you're compounding at, for the euro, 1.7%, and the US dollar 2.5%
per year.
Per year. So they're doing
Compounding.
Compounding.
Yeah, that's crazy. So you just by being invested in Swiss francs has already made a huge difference for our Danish investors or German investors.
Yeah, and then I mean, times are uncertain, right? There's a lot of geopolitical shifting going on. There's like it sounds like right now there's several active wars, but it might very easily escalate more. How do you think that factors into it?
Well, I think it's very important then to select, if you select an investment that you cannot move, just like real estate, we cannot just take the properties and move away. So I think it's very important to select a safe, relatively safe place to invest, which has, and historically, Switzerland has just been neutral and a very safe place in uncertain times. And that is also, I think that is also what you can see currently with the Swiss francs. it's very strong right now because there's a lot of uncertainty. So people are fleeing away from these uncertain areas. And a lot of the wealthy people are moving to Switzerland, and a lot of people who are uncertain in the markets also place their wealth in Switzerland. As a rule of thumb, it is said that around 20 to 25% of all of the wealth in the world is stored in Switzerland. So we have a very wealthy place here. So I think it's a good place to be when times are uncertain. I think it's just something that we profit from currently. When the markets are going crazy, it's just good to be in a safe and stable investment. And again, you're never going to quadruple your money with us over the next 4 years. That's just never going to happen. But we are fairly confident that we can achieve these returns of 10% per year over 10 years and 100% return of investment over 10 years and 300% over 20 years.
I mean, just for context, right? I come from Singapore, and in many ways, I feel like Singapore plays a similar role to Switzerland, but just maybe in the Asian hemisphere, right? And I know that in the past years, there's been so much capital flowing into Singapore looking for a safe haven that the government has now put in stamp duties that are massive, right? I don't even know now whether it's 30%, 40%, even more, right? For foreigners to buy properties in Singapore.
Yeah.
And you know what's the crazy thing? They still do. They can't stop, right? They put up these stamp duties to such an insane level, and foreigners are still buying. So it tells you that people are happy to pay that entrance fee just to know that they can get their money somewhere safe, right? Away from different, geopolitical risks or governments, needing to balance their budgets by preying on immovable properties within their own jurisdictions. And so when I look at that and I look at Swiss, I think, wow, I get the chance to buy a little slice of this safety in the West, right? In this place called Switzerland, and I don't have to pay these exorbitant entrance fees. And that's why for me it's very attractive.
Yeah. And it should be said, because now I'm just claiming that we're doing such a great job and blah, blah, blah. If you go to our website and check our share price, we actually got the ticker on NASDAQ, which is just Swiss. Our share price is, I think it's around 100 Danish kroners right now. And we went public with 107. So our share price has gone down and it has been down quite a lot. And for us, it would be greater if the market would also think that we have a great investment currently. But should be said, it's a long-term investment. And in properties, if you say long-term, it's really 10 years plus. So we are not very concerned about our share price currently. And if you go and look at our financials, you can see that the book value per share, so that is all the assets of the company divided by all the shares that are currently existing, you get a book value of 134. So for us right now, everything is on track. We are very happy with the performance of the company right now, but the share price is not as high as we think it should be, which is for some people, it's just a buying signal. And that is also what we do, just so that is said, not that I know that if you listen to you guys, your viewer, they have to be intelligent. So they will go and check out the price and they'll be like, hey, Alex is just a big bullshitter because I can see the price has actually gone down. So that must mean that they are not doing very good, but our financials are very good. It's just the only thing that you can conclude is that some people are willing to sell their shares. There are more people willing to sell their shares currently than there are who are willing to buy the shares. So that is all we can be said about our share price currently.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure the sophisticated investor will go through your slide deck and go through all your financials to look at how the book value per share was calculated, how it compares relatively
Exactly.
to others,
So
other
we are not
property
nervous about
managers.
that. It's just,
Yeah.
it will take some time. It's a long-term investment.
Always
And we are
do
in
all
year
your
3.
own, yeah, and you always have to do all your own due diligence, right?
Of course,
wherever, whenever. Yeah. So okay. Yeah. Crazy times, safe havens.
Alex, what's next for you?
I don't know. I don't know. I actually do not know what's next. Probably getting better.
In life, in business, in
love, getting better at managing the properties, focusing more on even adding more value, because that was actually a very good conversation that we just had, because I will skim this book again, because I still think that I'm a little bit stuck in non-productive tasks. I think there's still a lot of administrational tasks that would make more sense for me to outsource and get better with keeping my focus somewhere where I actually can create value. And that is definitely our internal goal right now, to get a new structure in the with the employees, so we just can focus on the more important and more valuable or value creating tasks. Because if a tenant calls us, it's of course important that we handle that problem. But a tenant who has 30 square meters of storage room is just not as important as a tenant who has 3,500 square meters of production facilities. And of course, we still need to manage the one who has 30 square meters, but we need to focus on the biggest or the bigger tenants, because they are just more important. And we do that, but I still think there is room for improvement. So that is going to be our focus in the second and third quarter of 2025, is getting a new structure. And as I mentioned in the beginning with the SOPs, really going through our standard operating procedures again, and making sure that we are really doing everything we can to automate our processes and standardize them.
What's so the publicly traded part of Swiss, well, I guess, I mean, this separate, right? The club deals are completely separate from Swiss itself. But so there's 9 properties in the fund right now. Is there any plans to acquire more?
Yes, our plan is always to acquire more properties. We are doing capital increases. We only did one last year, and we're currently doing one where we're going to raise money and then to buy and then create new shares to buy more properties. So our existing investors also profit from that, because the slice of the cake that they are owning will decrease, but the cake will just increase. So they will gain from that, because then we will have more properties and they will start to earn more money. And then if we have, every time we buy a new property, there's just an extra stream of income. So we are trying to increase the properties through capital increases. And we are, of course, also always participating with these capital increases. And we have a new employee who started in the 1st of April. So that's also where you can see the share price starting to go up, because we got a former private banker. We employed him as our fundraiser, because he has a very extensive network of investors, and he can of course tell them or recommend our shares to them, because he believes in the idea and the strategy that we're doing. And so we expect to be able to do a lot of capital increases in the future, and hence buy more properties and increase the profits, and hence getting an even better return of investment.
Right, and your property management benefits from some economies of scale, right? Where you guys get better, more efficient at handling these.
And we are just, again, we get better deals with the contractors, we get better deals with the insurance companies, because we are just a bigger portfolio. But we use the club deals already as leverage. We are with Swiss and with our club deals, we start to negotiate with all of the contractors, of course. So we're already leveraging being a big player.
But so when we drove around the area to look at some of the properties, the thing that really stood out to me is Switzerland is so small.
It is.
Within a few hours drive, we were able to traverse a good chunk of the country, right?
Yeah.
And that's really nice, right? When you're managing property, because it's not like they're not like 9 hours apart.
No.
You can get to them in a short drive, pretty much.
But that's also why it's important to have this network, because it's such a small country. There's only a limited amount of these properties, so that's why it's very important to get access to these properties.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, you told us some stories, which I thought that kind of speaks to the quality of buyer that you are, but also the management, where some companies that have been around for 100 years, they actually want to liquidate. They need some liquidity, so they end up selling the building that they are in to you, but then they make a really long-term lease agreement where they stay being the tenant, right? So there's no way that they would do that if they didn't trust that it would be a beneficial relationship.
Right? Yeah, and we only do that, of course. That is when one of the examples that you now mention is in Wengi, where they built what is it called? The Krankenwagen, the
ambulances,
and the fire trucks for primarily the Swiss government, but also for a lot of different countries in Europe. So during Corona, they had a lot of capital locked up in these not quite finished fire trucks and ambulances, because they were missing parts that they couldn't import during Corona. And then they needed to liquidate the property, sell it to us, so they had capital to survive until these parts arrived. So it was not because that's, of course, could also be a red flag. Why do you need capital? Why is it that the tenant or the owner is currently selling? In this case, it was because they needed to free up capital in order to pay for their running costs until they could finish this production line. And then we made a sale and leaseback agreement, is what we called it. And then, of course, we check if it is possible. Should this tenant go bankrupt or decide to leave after 10, 20 years, depending on the length of the contract, would we be able to find a new tenant? And we, of course, only buy a property if we think, yeah, we can definitely find a new tenant to at least an equal price, or in most cases, we think we can do even better, because this, if you are the owner of the building, they tend to decrease the rent that they are paying a little bit before they buy or before they decide to sell the property. Yeah. So we have an upside on that as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've seen the property, and I also make physical things. So it would be like, if you find somebody who rents it in their entirety, or if it would be broken up into different units, that you would easily find tenants for it.
And I don't know how the quality is in America, but I can see these videos and the social medias where people stumble and then they hit the wall, and then there's like a hole in the wall, and that's definitely not something that will happen at our properties. Our properties in Switzerland, they are really built to last. They live for 60 to 80 years without any problems. 60 years without any problems, and then you might, after 60 years, you probably need to do some renovations on the roofing and stuff like that. But we have a lot of the properties, they are built to last, and you can really feel that. So that's also why we chose Switzerland, to have something that can live forever.
Also, this is an interesting point. It's has a bit to do with economics and philosophy, so it's pivoting a bit away from the Swiss discussion. But so in the US, the commercial real estate is also of much better substance than the residential. Okay. And so you know, commercial, it doesn't mean that it looks better, but there's usually concrete, brick, steel, whereas in residential, it's usually, 99% of housing in the US is just wooden frame with sheetrock, right? And So it really, I think, I just as a German living there, I think that the residential real estate, like the quality is horrendous, and somehow the price they charge is like for a real house, but it's really not. It's like it's a stick box, and I think it has to do with this. I don't know, but I'm looking for a why, right? So in Germany, I used to live in Leipzig. That's also where I bought that place. And you walk around certain neighborhoods, and I think this is true in many older European cities. You walk around certain neighborhoods, and you see what the real estate that was built during the founding era, like usually turn of the century, early 1900s, and it's very grand, right? There's like really high ceilings and like beautiful masonry, usually nice woodwork for like the handrails of the stairs. Like the staircase in this building here, this is my grandma's house, is like hand carved oak. Like nobody does that anymore. Nobody could afford to, I think. Um, and I always think like, man, what happened? What happened to us that we gave up on building with this, like made to last hundreds of years versus just build it as cheap as possible. And I do think it goes to the core of what we've been talking about, these like sound economic theories, right? So back in the day when money was gold, or gold was money, I should say, whichever way. You had a different time preference. Everything you did, you thought about your kids and your grandkids rather than, I just need ROI Q1, right? So um I just know, I mean, this is my theory. I think actually, so reading Hoppe most recently, I think democracy also has something to do with it, although I I'm very hesitant to talk about it because it's a very unpopular line of thought, right?
Yeah, but I think I agree with you. I think that has definitely influenced a lot of our things and all the collectivistic ideas that you nowadays have. And I think, as you said, with the sound economic theories and sound money, that has, of course, influenced a lot of people and their time preference.
Yeah, and then high time preference means I want money. Like if I invest 10,000 today, I look for a return next month, right? Rather than
Over the long
10
run.
years from now.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think this is a really practical example of how what you were saying earlier, like better theories help you make better decisions, right? And so to me, this kind of ties it all up. Jason, do you have any last thoughts to share with Alex?
No, I agreed with most of what he has had to say. It's so cool to hear it come from the other side of the world, for me anyway, because I grew up in Singapore, where a lot of these things that we discuss on a head level, right, theoretical level, I sometimes find it difficult, because for us in Asia, it's more like learned experience. Like for us, you don't have to convince me that private property is important, right? For us, it's like trying to explain to me why the sun coming up is important, or why gravity is important. Like just incentivizing people with the right incentives, rather than what the government wants you to do for some theoretical moral reason. It just works better, right? So for me to be having this conversation, and I told Lovis the other day, actually, it's so cool to meet you and Kel and everyone at PFS, right? Because I was seeing these blonde, blue-eyed people telling me that private property is good, right? Yeah, I would like to keep more of the money that I earn, because I'm a better steward of that than some government largesse, right? And for me, it's so cool, because I'm like, hey, I need that. I don't see people or meet people ever in my circle around here that talks about these things. So thank you very much for masterclass in the theories and what we should read. And yeah, I can't wait. Maybe we can check back with Alex again in time to come and see how the different projects are going. see how he's doing personally. And I'm pretty sure if he has kids and there are 2 boys, the first one's going to be Doug and the second one's going to be Casey.
Yeah, I am a big Doug Casey fanboy. That is definitely
Really?
true.
I don't
I don't
think
know
it was
if you,
obvious enough.
yeah, I didn't know if I actually, if you could feel that, but actually, I like him.
Yeah, I can tell. All right.
Well,
So should we call it for now for this
yeah.
episode?
Well, thank you very much for having me on, and thank you very much for this conversation. I really do enjoy talking with you two. It's always a pleasure, and I hope we will check in even before we make a new podcast, should that ever be a topic again. But I hope we can start our book club as we have discussed to exchange some good books.
Yep. We definitely have to do that.
Yeah, I think we should start with one that we've already read, that you've already read, Alex. So
I'll start on Speculator or Atlas Shrugged.
Yeah.
Then you should do Atlas Shrugged. I would be in to read that as well. And
All right.
then we need to decide if we're going to read or Lovis read, like listen to them, just so we're on the same page there.
Yeah.
All right, cool.
Cool. Thanks so much, Alex.
Thank you.
Alex.
And
thank you so
take care.
much.
Good travels to Singapore, and then speak to you soon.
Yep. See you around.
See you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
And that wraps up our main conversation. But we're not done yet. We're going into overtime, where Jason and I unpack some insights, reflect on what just happened, and connect a few dots. And go.
That was pretty cool.
Very cool.
I guess when an hour and a half just flies past like that, it's a nice conversation, right?
That's right. It's always a bit of a challenge when because I feel like with Alex, we already had the conversation, or maybe even a couple times. Just, when we went to Switzerland in January and met with him, you knew him, I didn't know him at all. But so it's just like, the excitement of, meeting a new person and then like finding common ground is so cool, right? It's so much fun. And I just remember sitting in his living room and he was discussing with Gentian about some Austrian economic theory. And I was just thinking to myself, I was like, how lucky am I like to be here and like meet people who like so honestly and so like not honest, but like it wasn't something they did because we happened to sit there. Like I could just see them having these discussions no matter what. It's just what they do, right?
Yeah.
It drives them to the core. Like they really embody it on some level, to a level where I wish I could. I mean, that's what I'm working towards, right? So for me, it's an aspiration, but they're already there, and
it's very inspiring, right? Like that's why I said in
Yeah.
the intro for Alex, like he inspires me a lot, right? To see somebody believe in something and try their utmost best to live it out.
Yeah. And then
right?
he's quite a bit younger than us, right? He's like 10 years younger or so. So it's super cool. And then I was thinking, when we first met and we talked about similar topics, and you were like, man, I so wish I could study Austrian economics more, but there's very few resources, right? Very few sources where you can go. And I think now, having been in the space a little bit longer, I think there are, but you're right, it is very difficult. And I think in a way, the point of it is that you have to go and read the original works, right? It's not something that's easily taught as a second, third derivative. You go take a class at uni, very hard, right? That's the point. Because it's this upgrade of your operating system, it changes the way you see the world more so than, oh yeah, I studied psychology, or I wrote a couple of papers and here we are, like, no, it's not like that. It's very, well, and I mean, I picked psychology because it's my favorite topic to pick on, which is not necessarily fair, because I think actually Austrian economics has a lot of human psychology elements in it, because at the end of the day, that is what economics is you're trying to find a theory that captures human behaviors, human psychology, because that's really all that drives the world is that, right?
Human action, right? How
Human
people
action,
act.
right?
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I think Alex said it earlier, and I was thinking about if I should poke into it, but there was the famous phrase of there. I think, therefore I am. But I think Van Mises would say, "I act, therefore I am," and that is it's a distinct difference, right? We were talking about this yesterday, right? Nothing's inevitable. Death and taxes, but the mirror image of death and taxes is life and production, is what Ayn Rand said in Atlas Shrugged. But actually, you and I were saying yesterday, life and creation is really the antithesis of death and taxes, right?
And it's a nice mirror image, right? Yeah, can I say? I think in many ways you know what people say about it's very cliche now when people talk about how, oh, it's not the destination, it's the journey, right? But with thinking about freedom and things like the Austrian School of Economics, etc., right? It is a lot about the journey, right? Because when you mentioned how, hey, maybe it's not so easy to just take a course and then study Austrian economics, it's almost like this knowledge isn't something to be consumed. You actually have to seek it out and earn it yourself. You know, like if you lose money in an investment, you want to figure out why. If you see that your government's taking away more than a certain amount and it hurts you, and you feel like, hey, that it doesn't look right. I've visited other countries where their taxation rates, the burdens on citizens are way lower and they get way higher services. Hey, it's not right, right? These things are motivations for you to actually learn, right? And it's very different from going into economics as a purely theoretical endeavor, like learning about, facts, historical facts, etc., right? You're learning why people act the way they do. And I enjoyed I really loved it when Alex said, hey, reading these books makes me more intelligent. And then he went further to say that it helps him make better decisions. And it's a cool way of thinking about it, right? Like an intelligent person makes better decisions. Not that an intelligent person can solve multiplication tables faster, right?
It is usually a tenet of having more experience is better decision making because you've seen it before, right? But if you can gain better decision making from studying and applying theories, then that's like a cheat code, right? So then it genuinely does make you more intelligent.
It's yeah, dude. Imagine, okay, somebody says, hey, intelligence is based upon, or this empirical way of studying intelligence is taking someone, looking at their starting position, giving them time, and seeing where they end up, right? That means seeing how a person acts over his lifetime, and that compounding effect of all the decisions he's made to then judge whether a person was quote unquote intelligent, right? It would be interesting to think about it in terms of time preference. So if, say, we assume that low time preference equals better outcomes, that means the intelligent person has to act in a way that allows him to live, breathe, and interact in an environment that allows for low time preference decisions, right? And therefore, if you are an intelligent person and you're currently living in a society that forces you to make high time preference choices, you actually have to move to do well on this intelligence test, right?
Yeah, you do. But there's also, I think more than that, it's important to be aware of it. So for my for me, I don't think there is another society with a. Well, I shouldn't say that. I haven't experienced. There's so many societies, and I haven't experienced most of them, so I really can't speak on with authority on that. But I think the U.S. has very high time preference. Let's just say, people are impatient. They want money today, right? I mean, modern monetary theory, MMT, more money today, right?
Yeah, I saw that.
So doing business there, I think is great because consumption levels are high. So like people are eager to try out things. So launching a product in the US is very difficult, but it's very rewarding, right? Financially speaking. And so I think to make money being in that environment is great, but then you have to know what to do with it if you want to be able to hold on to some of it. So you definitely should have a plan for that. And so this is not something we spoke about with Alex today, but I know, but he has told us in private or in personal conversation, one-on-one, that he was like, yeah, Swiss is like it's like the ultimate savings account for his perspective, but you still need a cash cow to make sure you got something to put in your savings, right? So for me, this is like working in America. For me, that's the cash cow. And I'm not saying that that's all it is to me. It means a lot to me personally, right? It's my business, it's my baby. But it's more seeds to be planted for more prosperity later, right? So but then I guess for you and I mean, I don't know, these days it's hard to even kind of get the opposite, right? Like where I guess Switzerland would be a good place to move, where people are much more conscientious of the future.
Yeah, I mean, when I made that comment, right, about having to move, I don't think, like, if you're in the States, the question is, if you do want to live your life in a low time preference way, is there legislation that's stopping you? Is the state stopping you, right? Because then it's about culture, because, hey, I'm building this for my kids and my kids' kids. I'm trying to build a legacy. I'm building this house because I want it to withstand whether it's hurricanes or termites, whatever, right? I'm going to build it out of stone so that it is going to be there when my grandkids have grandkids, right? That's a cultural thing. And
Right.
as long as the government's not there to stop you, then you're actually free to act.
Right.
What I'm worried about is more like when it's a systematic uh, curtailing of that right. If a government takes away 90% of your income with taxes, or if a government is busy mobilizing the whole force of its people to fight adventurous wars, right? Then that instability and that uncertainty forces me to not make decisions for the long term, because who knows who's going to be the next government that's going to come in, or will this even be a country, or you know what I mean?
Yeah. Right.
And
Yeah.
by definition, if you're living in North Korea and everything's nationalized, then of course you have very, very high time preference. You just think about, what am I going to have for dinner tonight? Why plan for the future when there's nothing to plan about, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's stability matters a lot, right? I mean, in current times, it's hard to say that the US is stable. It doesn't feel stable, although fundamentally it probably still is. And then I don't know. The thing that really bugs me about so within this conversation, so I like Texas a lot in the US. I don't know if there's better, like a state that's more Austrian, I guess, than Texas. There probably is, but I don't know. I haven't looked that closely. But the one thing that bugs me is that they do have pretty high property taxes. So if you buy land or if you own real estate, you are taxed on that, which in many ways just makes it feel like the principle really is, from the government's perspective, we own everything and you're leasing it from us, right?
Yeah, because they could theoretically raise those taxes as and when they need to, right? And you think it's your land, but hey, at 100% tax a year, it's no longer your land, right?
Right. I mean, and even so, if you just have a lapse of judgment and you forget to pay or something, the recourse is insane, right? Like they can
seize it.
Yeah, basically. So it's a fairly small offense, I think, can have very drastic consequences. So that's a bit tricky. So I don't really know what to do with that. But then at the same time, property taxes are very common. In I don't know if there's a country that doesn't have it. I mean,
Actually,
Germany
China doesn't have it,
Yeah.
And I heard people commenting on that, saying that it's not going to be a developed country until they do have it. And I was like, okay, interesting, right? But
It's very
I
interesting.
yeah, I guess it's a good way from a governmental perspective. It's a very good way to raise taxes because that property cannot move, and you always know how much you need to raise, and you always know the value of that property, so you can use it as a gauge, right, or a dial.
And as well, and from a government's perspective, if they think they're doing a good job, so property values increase, then their tax base increases. But of course, that can be very misleading, because if you have rampant inflation, property values will shoot up and your tax base does increase, but that doesn't mean that you did a good job at all.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's very tricky. So then in a way, it gives an incentive to governments to want to
Raise
debase
prices. But dude, in all forms, right? Governments always want to debase. It helps them in every way.
Yeah, because they don't have skin in the game, right? It's just 4-year cycle, and you want to be reelected. So that's Hoppe's argument. Why? I mean, there's many more, but this is one of them. He's like, look, this is the definition of high time preference. Your job has a limited time, and the only way to keep it is by putting measures in place that pay off immediately, so that you get to keep your job. And so this is why in this democratic system, this ultra high time preference is baked into it, and it's very, very difficult to get it out with other incentives. And so that's one of the arguments why it's flawed.
I listened to an interview with LVG, Louis Vincent Gave, and Luke Roman together on the Gold We Trust interview, right? I think it just came out on YouTube a week or two ago, and I've heard LVG make these points before, right? And he said for the Chinese government, they're kind of different from the rest because they are really, really scared of inflation. Because for them, stability is key, and it's like their existential threat when there's a lack of stability, and inflation is always a factor in driving instability, right? Because once standard of not standard of living, once affordability goes down, people get angsty, right? And so for them, they don't care as much if the stock market doesn't go up, if nobody's driving Benzes, right? They just need to make sure everybody can afford to put a roof over their head. And, the standard basics of life on Maslow's hierarchy is never called into question, right? My friend from Australia just visited, and he was telling me like the situation in Australia now is like the opposite. People with really well-paying jobs, 90th percentile type jobs, two people working, trying to bring up a family, they're priced out of like a very median home, right? Median priced home. And so for them, it's the opposite, right? They're paying rent. They're like, if we do decide to take on a mortgage, it's like almost financially irresponsible at these prices. But rent is going up by double-digit percentages every year. Yeah. So at some point, if salaries don't keep up, you're on the street, right?
Yeah, but who's driving? Like, what's driving that market, right?
Man, that has to be another episode. But it's just, regulations again. If a government or a regulatory board allows irresponsible taking on of debt, to buy unproductive assets and you put it into the tax code to give people advantages to do that, guess what? It will happen, right?
Yeah. And then a lot of people regarding it as a safe investment. So tons of foreign money probably also in the market.
Yeah, tons and tons.
I
But
mean, in Germany, it's happening everywhere, I think, in the West. I mean, in Germany, most people cannot afford buying or building a house. At least,
yeah,
definitely not in the city, maybe in the country, right?
yeah,
But I mean, that's why I bought in Leipzig, which is like a tier 3. I mean, maybe, I don't know. We don't really do tiers, right? But it's not the
no.
big fancy city people think about. It's definitely
It's
more
not known as an expensive locale, right?
right. But then I mean, I've only had it for 5-6 years now, and price is definitely already up. I was just looking yesterday. Price probably increased 20-30%, which
Dude, last
is a
night
lot.
we had dinner at the playground. The kids wanted a pizza. We ordered 4 pizzas, right? Nothing spectacular, just normal takeaway pizzas, right? I'd say like it's like Domino's level or worse, right? 4 pizzas, 62 euros.
One in Leipzig, that's nuts, man. Because it used to be like 8 euros a pizza, maybe, you know.
Yeah, dude, like how do you afford that? Like that's and it's like margarita pizzas, right? It's like a piece of dough with cheese in a cardboard box, no delivery. We actually picked it up ourselves and walked to the playground to eat it, right? So how can you have that? How can 4 pizzas be 62 euros in a city like Leipzig? Like it's crazy, right? And when I say it's crazy, I don't mean it as a complaint. I mean it as how is this economy going to balance itself if people don't earn enough to buy the basics, you know?
Right. Yeah.
Anyway, let's chat a little bit more about it another time because I actually need to go catch a flight.
That's right. Well, thanks, Jay. I'll get editing.
Yeah, hey, and we got Jen coming on soon, so I'm excited for that one.